Manx Radio Podcasts, powered by Shaw.
Hello and welcome to the Women Today podcast, where we look back at some of our favourite bits from the past week. And we met Michelle Berry on Thursday, who talked so openly about having womb cancer, a disease which is rarely talked about despite it being the fourth most common cancer overall. And it led on to a really interesting and at times amusing conversation about what we call private body parts. Also this week, we wore beards for a day. Find out why. And Dot Tilbury joined us to tell us stories about a late, great Manxman. But first, our younger woman today, Michelle Jameson, has gone off to university now. So before she left, we put her to work again.
So we have the GAP medics in the studio and we were speaking to them before the break. And obviously their experience in Tanzania was absolutely fantastic and they've just got so much to say about it. I'm interested to know what your advice would be, just one sentence or so, not so much, about other people that might thinking about experiencing this. Charlotte, we'll start with you.
If you're considering it, just do it. Just you can never ever regret what you see out there and what you get to do. Just do it. Definitely.
Anna?
Yeah, pretty much the same. Just go out and do it. It's definitely worth all the preparation and the hard work that you have to put in to get there, but once you do it, you just won't regret it,
because you do have to pay for this experience. We will just put that out there. Rebecca, what about you?
Even if you're struggling for money, there's like so many ways you can fund it, like fundraising. I just think it's the best experience of my life and I would recommend it to anyone who wants to go into any form of medical field.
Pooja?
I'd say definitely go out and experience it, because there's nothing else you can compare to it, especially when you live on this island. You have to go out and just explore different things, otherwise you'll never know what it's like.
And Matty?
It's so amazing, because even if you don't have an interest in the medical field, you should do it regardless of what you want to go in to, because you learn so much from it.
Is that actually a possibility?
Yeah, even if you wanted to be a lawyer or do maths at university, you could go out there and still learn and be in the hospitals, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you want to be a doctor. You just get to see the exposure to the hospital.
Absolutely fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the show today. It's been great fun. This is the last Younger Women Today for a little while. Christy and Beth will be back with you tomorrow for Women Today. And thank you for joining me, Michelle Jameson, and Charlotte, Anna, Rebecca, Pooja, Matty, all in the studio. Oh, we've had a little cough at the end there. Okay, till next time. Bye-bye.
It is 20-3 now.
Beth, I am very impressed with the fact that you still have your beard on.
Do you know, I hadn't noticed that you'd taken yours off. And I don't mean that horribly. When did you take yours off? You're supposed to be wearing it for the whole show.
About 10 minutes ago, it was just getting a bit hot and itchy.
Do you know what? This is made of wool, Christy, and it is very uncomfortable, I'm going to be honest. I quite like the fact I can play with it, though.
You need to meet my friend Ed, who has the most magnificent beard. And he has people just come up to him and saying, "Can I just stroke your beard, please?"
Really?
Yeah, it's fantastic. I will show you a picture of it.
Does he comb it?
He does. He combs it. He puts oils in it. He has one of these moustaches that he can twist. He's on our film festival committee, so if anyone was at the festival, they'll have seen him over the weekend. He sort of twists the end of his moustache as well, so it's fantastic.
Anyway, our studio guest this afternoon is the unbearded director of the Manx Aviation and Military Museum, Ivor Ramsden. And Ivor, we were talking about how the museum is absolutely crammed full of artefacts. It opened back in 2000. Any idea of how many you've got?
Yeah, strangely enough, we're just heading for our 7,000th acquisition. I don't know what it's going to be. It depends what comes in through the door in the next few days. Everything that comes in we log, we record it, photograph it, measure it up and everything, keep a detailed description of it. So it is quite intriguing. I'm hoping it's going to be something spectacular and not just a button or something like that.
And where do all these things come from?
From everywhere you can imagine, mainly from people on the island. Stuff comes from across, from people who've had relatives working on the island in the armed forces or similar to that. We've had a few things from even as far as Australia, where a guy whose father was in the Royal Australian Air Force served at Derby in 1944. So we got a wonderful collection of stuff from him.
And, you know, do you ever find yourself on eBay looking for military history articles like that?
Yeah, we have bought a couple of items from internet auction sites, shall we say. Only things with a specific Isle of Man link. and we have got some really interesting items. A uniform that belonged to the commanding officer of RAF Andreas back during the Second World War. Items that were associated with an American guy who was killed on the island. Things like that. Fascinating stuff.
What's on your artefact wish list? What do you really, really want to see come through your door?
Well, a working Merlin engine. I keep going on about these things, don't I? Spitfire engines. But a working one of those would be nice, because the one that we've got is broken. But no, we'd welcome absolutely anything, from a button to a Bible to a box of anything, really. So if it's got a link to the island's military or aviation history, we welcome it on board.
Now, these items do all have sort of stories behind them. You talk about the aviation history, and I was asking you before, what is your favourite story, or what's one of your favourite stories? And you came out with this brilliant story about a frog.
Yeah, the frog. It's probably the most famous amphibian on the Isle of Man now, because I tell this story to all the school children who visit the museum. During the height of the Blitz in 1940, there was a big bombing raid on Liverpool one night in September, and one of the German aircraft that was supposed to be bombing Liverpool for some reason dropped its 4 bombs on Cronknery Lay, which, to those of you who know it, isn't the most strategic target in the middle of the Irish Sea. It's just a big rock, basically, covered in heather. So for whatever reason, this aeroplane dropped its 4 bombs, made 4 big craters in the side of the hill, and killed a frog, which somebody found the following morning. And it was handed into the Manx Museum, and they've still got it. It's not on display regularly, although it does come out on special occasions. It recently had a foray to the House of Manannan for an exhibition there. But I remember it as a kid, and it's probably the reason I live on the Isle of Man now, that to come into the island on holiday as a very small boy, I remember this black and crisped frog in a display cabinet in the Manx Museum.
It's interesting. You mentioned this is a story that you tell to school children, and we had an email from one of the teachers at Ashley Hill who says, we go to the Aviation Museum every year. It's brilliant. Ivor is so patient with the children. We normally do some fundraising to make a donation. 2 things there, I suppose, in trying to inspire this next generation of aviation enthusiasts, because I suppose you might think that people who are into this are a little bit older generally.
Yeah, I think that was the case a while ago, but certainly now that the subject of World War II particularly is being taught in the history syllabus at school, the kids lap it up. All the teachers say that it's one subject that really does inspire them. So I don't have to work very hard. I just show them some of the things that we've got in the museum, tell them a few stories like the one about the frog, and they seem to just lap it up.
Now, the museum is staffed by volunteers as well. How many have you got?
We've got about 12 regular volunteers who actually staff the place. We haven't got enough to double up, unfortunately. It would be nice to have 2 people there. One can sort of help with enquiries while the other can do other things. But we've got enough to go by, but we always welcome new volunteers.
And the need to expand is something that you hinted at earlier. There are plans which are sort of sketched out at the moment, but nothing set in concrete. What do you need to make that happen?
A lot of money, really. Our funds are limited. They're okay for keeping the day-to-day running expenses at bay, but a new building which ticks every box that we've got is going to be an awful lot of money. We're looking over £500,000 to build it and fit it out with display cases. So it's very much a pipe dream at the moment, but we hope that somebody out there might be able to help us at least part way along the road. And
in terms of the day-to-day running costs of the museum, how much does it cost to keep it going?
Good question. Our treasurer did a bit of a project on that recently. I can't remember the answer. I think it averages out something like £250 a week, something like that. That covers electricity, rent, which we have to pay rent to the government. Much as I love our government, I don't like paying them rent, so yeah, I won't go there. The intruder alarm needs to be paid for and everything. It's not a huge outgoing, but it has to be raised from somewhere.
And generally you find people are quite generous with donations. I mean, you got £600 just the other weekend.
Yeah, that was amazing. Some people are very, very generous, yeah, and yet we get others who'll come round and don't put anything in the tin. It's it's entirely voluntary, but I am rather surprised sometimes when people ask you lots of questions and you give them lots of information, a bit of personal touch, and then they wander away without making a donation. It's a bit disappointing.
What is the reason, though, that by going for the donations rather than just setting a nominal fee for people getting in?
When we first opened back in 2000, we charged £1 entry fee just for adults. Children got in free, and it was our patron at the time, Air Marshal Ian McFadden, who was the governor. He suggested that we drop the admission fee. He said, why don't you drop it and see what happens? So we did, and we were stunned. The first weekend that we dropped it, we publicised it quite widely, and we were absolutely inundated with people. I thought, good heavens, they're charging £1, put so many people off. And as a result of the increased footfall, donations went up, sales in the shop went up, and our income probably doubled that first year. It was amazing.
Incredible. So many stories at the museum. Can you tell us about some of the prominent female figures in Manx aviation history?
Yeah, there aren't very many, unfortunately. And really none that are homegrown or none that spring to mind. We've got quite a few illustrious aviators who've got connections with the Isle of Man, probably starting with Amy Johnson. She was a Yorkshire lass, like me, apart from the last bit. She came to the island in 1933, which was a couple of years after she'd flown solo to Australia. She came with her husband, who was also an intrepid flyer. Just on a visit. They were hosted by the governor and feted everywhere, given civic dinners and everything. And Amy planted a tree in Glen Helen, and that's still there to this day, with a little plaque at the bottom of it commemorating her visit. But back then, a female aviator, an aviator of any sort, was pretty much akin to an astronaut these days. They didn't grow on trees. But a lot of the background work with the Royal Air Force and the Royal Navy on the Isle of Man was done by ladies. At Ronaldsway, which was a Royal Naval Air Station, there was something like 1,500 ground staff at the airfield, and the great majority of them were women. And it wasn't just the administration get people, it was people who were loading torpedoes onto aeroplanes and things like this. Even servicing the aeroplanes, it was done by girls. And they were girls, some of them they probably weighed about 6 stone, wet through, And over the years, we've had quite a few of them visit the museum because it's on their old home patch, and some of the stories that they've told have been quite interesting, shall we say. One or two aren't fit to repeat in public, I'm afraid. You have to come to the museum and I'll tell you in private if you're interested. But there was one memorable occasion when a bus tour pulled up at the gate, and an elderly lady got off and made her way into the museum, and she had just that look in her eye. I thought, this isn't just a random visit, and I managed to get hold of her and start talking to her. And she'd been stationed at Ronaldsway as a mechanic on aeroplanes, and she had a handbag with her which was bulging with stuff from the time. And she was there in 1945, and it was after the war had ended in Europe and things were easing up a little bit. Ronaldsway Airfield was going to close, and every week there was a dance organised by one or other section at the airfield, and she got all the passes, all the tickets for the dancers, and all the dance cards, which were full of names of all the people who she'd danced with. And it was wonderful. She was a really lovely old lady, and it was her who told me the story of the last train from Douglas on a Saturday night was known as the Passion Wagon. Can't think why.
Women Today, brought to you by citywing.com for your next flight away.
I might be able to pick up a few handy hints and tips from the new children's activity marquee, which is being hosted by expert bread maker and inspirational food demonstrator Linda Hewitt. We are so delighted that Linda's been able to join us this afternoon. And Linda, you live in Lincolnshire now, but you were baked and raised in the Isle of Man.
Yeah, it does make me sound like a prize heifer.
Bread. I was thinking bread, you see.
Yes, bread.
There was a bread link there. I thought that was clever. No? Okay.
No, it is clever, that's fine, and it's absolutely true.
And your Manx roots still very important to you?
Yes, completely, yeah.
Why is that, would you think?
It's who I am. Besides always growing up and wanting to change my name, everything about growing up in the Isle of Man I'm very, very proud of.
Why did you want to change your name?
I think it was just one of those growing up things. My sister will understand if she's listening.
Well, you mentioned that your Manx roots are very important to you, and you actually chose to honeymoon in Port Erin.
Yes.
Why was that?
It's kind of a family tradition, really. I grew up swimming in the sea, and the Liverpool University used to have an association. The Marine Biology Station was there, and the Cosy Newt Cafe is there, and I just love Port Erin, so swim there regularly. And my poor husband had to honeymoon there too. But I've got some great stories if we have time, and an apology to make to somebody who lives on one of the back roads.
You should tell us now. Come on,
Okay.
Yes,
you
come
can't
on.
just drop that and leave it.
Our honeymoon was in winter, but my sister had a honeymoon there. My parents had their honeymoon there. Gosh, we don't fall far from the tree, do we? But anyway, it was October, and I think we were the only honeymoon couple.
Do you reckon?
In Port, probably. And the people at the co-op felt very sorry for us because when mentioned in fact they knew when we came through the store. So when we went to buy our sausages, we were having a barbecue down at Langness, just the two of us, but we had no wood, and we nicked some out of somebody's driveway. Isn't that awful? But we thought they wouldn't mind six pieces of wood for a honeymoon couple having a fire down at Langness.
You're not talking from the actual trees, like chopping them down and taking them
it's
away.
from their wood pile at the but it was inviting us. Isn't that awful? It's you can resist anything but temptation. So we had the sausages, the links of love, the people at the co-op told us, and I asked for half a dozen sausages and they gave us 12. They thought we needed the energy.
Well, if anybody was ever wondering what happened, now they know. Now they know. An apology live on the radio this afternoon. Thank you, Linda. Tell me, I know what a bread maker is. What is a food demonstrator?
I've called myself, or kind of relabeled, called myself a food demonstrator because I do anything that involves food. So I'm working with Robinson's for the weekend at the Isle of Man Food and Drink Festival, but I've just been hosting a bread course at Denman College for the WI, and when I leave the island on Tuesday, I'm a judge at the World Bread Awards down in London. I've also worked on housing projects, so anything from one-to-one bread to food demonstrations, working with celebrity chefs, and demonstrations at Hampton Court Palace and everything in between. So it kind of covers all of it, but it's not about me, it's about the food and passing on recipes and cookery skills. I mean, I'm going to learn a lot from Pam today, and we've already talked about kipper kedgeree. Next will be stealing a bonnet recipe. So it's all about passing on information.
Stop talking about stealing, all right? I'm a bit worried. Yes. Lock down everything.
It's okay, I've got hold of my pen.
Oh dear, we'll be checking your pockets when
I
you
like
leave.
to share.
Now, you say that you are 50 plus, you're a survivor of cancer, and so you no longer feel guilt and only mild embarrassment if you're caught singing and dancing in the kitchen or binge TV watching.
Yeah.
I mean, clearly going through cancer must have had a tremendous impact on your life.
Yes, but you're so busy fighting a disease like that, especially if you've got a family. And can I just say, deep respect, you have 3 children. I'm sat opposite somebody who looks young and radiant, and I'm thinking, my God. So 2 children and a husband that stood by me, and an awesome circle of friends and family. And I feel they probably suffered more than I did because I just had tunnel vision, just get on with it. But it was a tough 2 years, yeah, and a transplant, stem cell transplant.
And you're quite open about what you've been through because it must be difficult to talk about.
I got some very good advice when I was diagnosed from a friend who subsequently died from cancer, and he's also a swimmer and a big talker. And he said that you must talk about it, you've got to share it, and the people that can relate to you, they'll be there to support you. And it gives people the opportunity to hide away if they don't want to. And so I do believe in all this business, sharing our history through storytelling with Pam, talking on the radio. We survive through talking, communication. And so, yeah, I found it easy to talk about it, actually.
And a huge inspiration, I suppose, for anybody who's going through something similar to see you on the other side.
I hope so. And myself and my family have done a lot of sponsorship as well, so...
Now, some of that does involve swimming. You are a swimming fan, as you hinted at. You've been swimming in the sea every day since you've been here.
Yes, and I'm meeting some of the Manx open water swimmers as I come from here. I could dive down through the window, actually.
You
could. Once around the Tower of Refuge.
You don't wear a wetsuit?
No, I don't need one. I've got Biopreme.
Pardon?
Biopreme.
Oh, right. Did you steal that from somewhere?
No, I grew it myself.
But some of my favourite facts about you, Linda, your talents aside from bread making and swimming, actually, you can swim straight and feet first.
Yeah. Now, if you've ever been in a swimming pool, you'll probably appreciate that a bit more. And my sister picked me up on the grammar of that. So if you're listening, Carol, I'm going to explain it all now. Swimming straight is actually quite a good talent because most swimmers, especially once they get out into the open, they zigzag all over the place. So if you're taking part in an open water event or a triathlon, you can swim twice the distance from zigzagging. But I can swim straight. And then feet first is an awesome skill, not least because you look so graceful. And if you've painted your toenails, again, you get a chance to show that off. But it strengthens the wrists. So Jack Coop, if you're listening, because he's a masters coach on the island, everybody should be made to do a length of feet first at the end. So
Right.
it gives you sculling skills.
Now we know.
And it works on your abs, because you've got to keep your feet up.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yes. You can also quilt, speak Norwegian, and joint a chicken in 3 minutes.
Yeah.
What a terribly useful skill that must be. Sunday dinner round at yours, Linda. Eh?
Anytime you like.
When did you discover you could do that?
I've learned to do that. I mean, I didn't go to the University of Bread Buns and Chicken Filleting, but...
I think you might be discovering how to do that at the food festival, so I shouldn't laugh too much.
Do you know, Christy and I were, when we read about that, Linda, we were like, could we go down to a supermarket right now and get
a chicken for you to do
Because
it, yeah.
It's just so tempting. If anyone's got a spare chicken in their car that they could just deliver up here, that would be brilliant.
We'll film you doing it just to prove it.
Stuart has texted to say I should ask you about bungee jumping without a bungee down by the arches. Broken arms were had, apparently.
Yes. Yes, you see my Manx history. Oh my goodness.
It's all going to come out today, Linda.
I was very nervous doing a WI talk yesterday because I knew my history would come back and bite me on the bum. And who was that phoned in?
Stuart.
Hello, Stuart, and thank you very much for all your support. Because, he got me to the hospital.
Oh, dear me.
It's me. I imagine there's going to be more stories before the end of the show. I really hope so. On the show today, we hear about a memorial concert to mark the life of a true and very popular Manxman.
But Aubrey Street was terrible before the war. The buses used to go up, the single-decker buses used to go up Aubrey Street. And many a time there was so much of a traffic jam that people used to jump off the bus, nip into a shop, buy something and back on the bus again.
Well, that man was Ian Qualtrough. He passed away earlier this year at the age of 90. He was hugely involved in so many aspects of community life. Perhaps best known, though, and loved for being an entertainer at events around the island with a very sharp eye and an exceptionally dry wit, I think it's fair to say. And someone who was his sidekick at many of those events is Dot Tilbury, and she is also with us this afternoon. Dot, do you remember when you first met Ian?
I do. It was when I left school, I went down to work in London and I came back to the Isle of Man and I thought, I want to get involved in sort of a bit of local culture. So I went to the Braid of Stedford and I had an Auntie Doe who did Manx dialect poems and thought I would learn a poem for the Braid of Stedford. Went up and it was at the time where you had to lie down on your bed to put your jeans on, and I had my words in my pocket in case I forgot. And halfway through, of course, I forgot the words and sort of tried to pull out these words and they all ripped and everything. So, of course, Ian was a judge. And he said, and then we had Dorothy Kelly pulling words out of her knickers. And I thought, oh, God. And from that day on, I thought, God, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to write my own words so I can read them. Now, what logic in that? And that's how it all started. It was Ian Qualtrough's fault. And then I got, he invited me down to his house, and he used to do this double act with a chap called Walter Collister. And him and Walter did the ventriloquist act. I don't know if you've seen it or not, but it was a very, very funny act. And he had a rickety old film of him and Walter doing this act. And he looked at me and he said, do you reckon you can do it? And I said, well, I'll have a go. And I didn't know whether I was playing the ventriloquist or the dummy. Anyway, we did a bit of practicing and went out. And I don't know how many hundreds of times we did it, but every time it was different. And every time I'd fall about laughing because Ian was just so funny, the funniest man ever. And towards the end, he was forgetting his words, and I'd be sort of going through my t-shirts, a tin of pears and a tin of peaches and things like that, and he'd be going, what? So we'd have this conversation because he was sort of getting a bit older then. And even when he was in his latter days, when I went down to see him, and he'd forgotten a lot of things, but I always used to say, name 4 fruits beginning with T, and he used to go, tomato, tangerine, tin of pears, and a tin of peaches. And he remembered, and another famous joke from that particular sketch was there'd always be an MHK in the audience, and I'd look round and I'd say, Jeff Corkish said to, I don't know, Howard Quayle, what are we going to do about the homosexual bill? And Jeff said, pay it. And and that used to, sort of half an hour later, people would still be laughing, and it was just so funny. I went to his funeral and I spoke to his sister who lives in Canada, and she said, she said, Ian was so lucky to find the gang that he found to go around doing concerts all over the island, because I think one Christmas we did about 17 concerts and had 16 Christmas dinners. And I said, well, on the contrary, I said I was very lucky, and we were very lucky to be with Ian, because he was the best company.
This afternoon, we're going to talk about why there's still something of a stigma when it comes to discussing female health issues, which, as a result, can lead to too many women delaying seeking medical advice when there's something wrong. And our guest in the studio is Michelle Berry, who's raising awareness about the 4th most common cancer affecting women, but one that isn't very often talked about. And I should say at this point, we may be talking about some issues which could be uncomfortable for some listeners, but we think it's really important to raise the profile of this particular cancer amongst all others as well. Michelle, what are we talking about?
We're talking about uterine, womb, endometrial cancer.
And this is something that you have had personal experience of. You were diagnosed, nearly a year ago?
I was diagnosed on October 5th of last year.
So how did you know that there was something wrong?
Well, I started out having a urinary problem, and I turned 50 this year, and I had passing clots after having sex, which, that's not right. Painful sex. I could sneeze and I'd feel a really sharp pain deep down in my pelvis. Bladder issues. My period slowly dwindled away. And I wasn't in menopause because I eventually had a blood test done, which showed I wasn't in menopause. But, they had just disappeared.
But I guess because you were approaching 50, some people would say, well, that's a normal thing that
I kept being told, it's because you're going into menopause, yes.
So how much did you know about womb cancer before you were diagnosed?
I knew nothing about womb cancer. I knew about cervical cancer, and I knew about ovarian cancer because they're very much in the media profile. They're talked about. It was talked about when Jade Goody died. I knew about ovarian cancer because it's called the silent killer, but knew nothing about womb cancer.
So you got this diagnosis start of October last year. I imagine it's difficult to put into words how you felt when you received that news.
I was devastated. I knew there was something wrong with me. I kept going to doctor's appointments, and I'd come back and I would say, look, I tell my best friend, I said, there's something wrong with me. And I even had a colposcopy. I went through and had, after I was having passing the clots after sex, went to the GP, who referred me on, and I had a colposcopy, and that came back clear. And uterine cancer can't be diagnosed with having that kind of a test. So when I got told, I was, how did they, I just couldn't see how they missed it. But it's devastated me.
If it can't be picked up by the means that you're talking about, how actually was it found in the end?
By a pipette biopsy.
It's incredible to think that this is the 4th most common cancer, and yet we don't really know anything about it. In terms of how your treatment plan went once the diagnosis was eventually made, what did you have to go through?
Well, I had an MRI, which then showed the tumour. I got sent to Liverpool Women's, and I went over and saw the consultant, the surgeon there, was scheduled for a hysterectomy. Which that didn't bother me so much, but it has been the loss of the hormones and stuff that has bothered me a lot. And then after that I had and I have to say that my surgery was quite difficult. My bladder was fused to my uterus. My tumor was the size of a tennis ball. I had to have a very large T-cut on the inside of my vagina to pull the tumor out whole along with my uterus, so it was encapsulated so they didn't spread any. So the recovery from that was quite a long time. I got the histology. I had to go back and get the histology of it, and I was told that I had cancer cells in the microcapillaries of my uterine wall, and my tumor was 1 centimeter away from the edge before it had grown outside of my uterus. So I had to make a decision. I had to decide if I wanted 3 internal brachytherapy radiation treatments, or did I do 5 weeks of external radiation therapy and 1 brachytherapy. So weighing up all the odds of deciding what I needed to do, I did the 5 weeks.
Physically and mentally, I imagine this past year has been a complete and utter roller coaster for you and your family.
Yeah, it's been difficult. I mean, I have good days and I have bad days.
And where are you now as far as treatment goes?
Well, I go back every 3 months, and they check me over to see, if there's any signs of the return of my cancer. I now, because of the radiotherapy, I've got permanent nerve damage in my legs. I can't even, because our bedroom's on the top floor of our house. Sometimes I have to crawl up the stairs to get up to our bedroom and our bathroom.
So let's talk about womb cancer then. I mean, you mentioned some of the symptoms that you experience, the bleeding after sex, that feeling in your stomach. What are the other symptoms that women should be looking out for?
Urinary problems, same kind of symptoms as you would have with cervical cancer and stuff. But yeah, basically it's the pain in the pelvis, abnormal bleeding, especially for women that have had their menopause and have stopped their periods, bleeding for them. At one point, and this is the part where that's probably not very pleasant, after when I could go for a wee and look in the toilet, and there was tissue floating in the toilet, and at the time, I just kind of thought, okay, that's a bit strange, but and now I found out that was my uterine lining shedding as my tumor was growing into my uterus.
And what about the risk factors? Who is most at risk of developing womb cancer?
If you have a uterus, you're at risk.
So there's
well, I got told it was an older woman's cancer, but I belong to a forum online it's womb cancer support group, and there's girls 18, 20 that's been diagnosed with this cancer. One girl was told that she was just having very heavy periods, and eventually her mother kept taking her back, saying there's something wrong with her, and they finally did a scan, and she had uterine cancer. And now she's had to have a hysterectomy. And
well, Michelle, we are going to be finding out later about an event that you're holding to raise the profile of this disease and also raise money for 2 charities, and we'll be talking about that, as I say, later. But I just wonder why it is that we are still so bad about talking about intimate health issues, because it doesn't make any of us feel very comfortable. And I said it's delaying some women seeking medical attention, and that ultimately could be so serious.
On my, I've got an event page for my event, and I've been taking links from the Eve Appeal, which is one of the charities I'm raising money for, and also just different pages on Facebook that have been posting things, because September is Gynecological Cancer Awareness Month, and it said, one of the things I posted said that 44% of UK women don't know the proper names for their female reproductive organs.
Yeah, I think that's probably
it probably is right, actually. Yeah, it probably is right. So
I don't think I could name them all.
No. I don't know. But this is an interesting question. I was talking to Dr. John, and we'll hear from him in just a moment, actually, because I don't know how you felt, Michelle, actually going to the doctor and just talking about these issues, way back when all this started. Is it something that you felt particularly uncomfortable with, or are you quite happy talking about any aspect of your body?
No, I was quite happy with it.
Do you think that's a different upbringing? Is that
probably because Americans are more open. I suppose. I mean, I don't know. But I'm just quite I'm quite out there, so it could just be me.
But it's key though. I mean, you knew there was something wrong, so you kept going back until you got the right diagnosis, and I think that is fundamental to what we're talking about this afternoon. Is that if you feel there's something not right, that you need to just lose the embarrassment about it.
Yeah, because obviously our immediate instinct, if we're told by a medical professional, is, oh, it's fine, there's nothing wrong. Our immediate instinct is to think, okay, well, they know exactly what they're talking about, so I'll just go home and leave it, So it's difficult, isn't it? Because I'm sure that is mostly, it is absolutely fine, but it is your body. And so if you do still continue to feel something isn't right, it is just that knowledge that it's okay to go back and say, oh, do you know what, I still think there's something just not quite right here, and they're not going to judge you for it, they're just going to help you and deal with it, hopefully. So.
Well, that's what I was talking to Dr. John about a short time ago, and asking for his opinion really on how we deal with embarrassing medical issues, and this is for men or women. And he has this advice about what to do if you're deliberating about whether or not to go and see the doctor.
Oh, please come. I realise obviously it is difficult to begin to talk about areas that you don't talk to anybody about, but that's what we're here for. For us, dealing with all of the bits of you that you don't tend to talk about is bread and butter. We do it every day of the week, and we are quite happy to try and allay your fears. Would you frankly prefer to sit at home worrying about what might be, or what you've Googled, or what your neighbour's cousin has told you, or would you prefer to come in and have a 2-minute conversation with a doctor that may feel a little bit difficult to start with, but come out feeling better and reassured, or at least knowing that something's going to be done to make your mind at ease? I would say the latter. I hope most others would too.
And we are also asking listeners today, Dr. John, what we should teach children about private body parts and what we should call them as they're growing up. I don't know if you have any thoughts on this. Should it always be the anatomically correct version of the words, or are other words okay?
I don't actually feel terribly strongly about this. Everybody has euphemisms. I think the important thing is to be open and to communicate. What's not terribly healthy is refusing to discuss things, or shying away from things, or running away, or saying it's dad's job or it's granny's job or whatever. I think the more we talk about our private areas, or the areas of our bodies which don't normally get talked about, the less stigma there is attached to it, the less of a problem it is, and the more your child is likely to come to you then if there is a problem later on. If you talk to them, they will talk to you. That's probably the most important message I would give. I don't actually think it matters personally terribly much what you call it.
Okay, Dr. John, with some very good advice there. When teaching kids about their bodies, why can't we just call a spade a spade?
Or a penis, Beth.
And you won't be able to say it. It's an issue. Yeah.
See, you just can't say the words, can you? Go on, say it.
I can say them. And if my children ask me, and as they have asked me, what's this called, I would always tell them what the right word is. But in day-to-day conversation, I think I struggle. Do you think it matters what you call your body parts, Christy?
No, I don't think so. Obviously there's something quite cute, isn't there, about little ones kind of using different words for their body parts, and it is kind of funny. I do think it could present these problems that we're talking about now, that from a very early age, if you're not told the correct words for your body parts, then you kind of think, well, isn't that then instilling this idea that there's something wrong with them? There's something wrong with using the word vagina or penis. Like you were saying at the very top of the show, you couldn't bring yourself to say it. And I wonder if that's partly to do with the fact that when we're little, we're told, oh no, call it your flower. Do you know what I mean? Which is cute and everything, but surely it's, in a way, it's not very helpful. And what do we feel we're achieving by not telling them the word?
I quite like Dr. John's point of view on this, though, that as long as you're sort of talking about it and you are open and you don't sort of make it into, something dirty and an issue, that it's okay. And we just need to normalise that aspect of it. But as I say, I would always tell my children the right words if they ask me. But, they've sort of opted for girl bits and boy bits, which I think is okay.
It is, but then at the same time, you don't give your elbow a different word. Do you know what I mean? You don't.
No, that's right. And then do you end up sort of breeding this generation of children who are the ones that go to the doctor and say, I've got a problem with me. Sort of looking down. What's your view on what you should teach children, Michelle?
Well, I taught my kids to have a cute name for it. In Oklahoma, we call it a hoo-ha. But I think the one thing is that I think society over the years has got it to where the word vagina is a vulgar word, or those kind of proper names for it. That's a dirty word. You don't want to say that.
That's I think where I'm coming from. But I can understand why. At the same time, I suppose they're probably quite difficult words for kids to say. Simply, sort of the word vagina isn't an easy word to say probably for a child. But I do, like you said, I just think it's that idea of it possibly creating this notion that there is something wrong with it, and there clearly isn't.
We've got lots and lots of thoughts on this one. Kirsty says, I've got a friend who's very particular about calling them the correct anatomical... I was quite
Anatomical, yeah.
quite proud of myself saying that, about calling them the correct names, but I don't call it a vulva myself, so it feels weird to call it that. We are front, bottom and woolly here. They say bits at playgroup. Judy says, I think as long as you know the meaning of the word, it's fine to use nicknames. I know what my child means when she says them, and she knows what she means. Language is about communication, and I don't need her to say the right word for me to understand what she's talking about.
Yeah, and on our Facebook as well, Wendy says, I just tell them the truth. Kids aren't stupid. It's more the parents being embarrassed. Jane says, as you were saying, in our house, they're referred to as lady bits and little boy bits. Sarah says, I hate silly names. The only one that's acceptable, in my opinion, is Willie, because that's a colloquial name a lot of people use but doesn't sound ridiculous. And you know what's funny is even reading out these comments, I feel really uncomfortable.
I know. Well, I've avoided lots of them because I think, oh no, I don't want to say that.
There you go.
But is that because I'm uncomfortable? Because I'm thinking, oh, people are going to be listening going, what she just said.
So then we've all got a problem, haven't we?
Oh, yeah. What do you think on this one? Let us know. 166 177. And it is now time to find out about another heroine from Manx history. We're joined once again in the studio by Pam Crow. Okay, Pam, so who are we talking about today?
Well, my heroine from history this month is Sophia Jane Crane. Now, she was born in Lonnon on the 3rd of November in 1833 and must have been a very proud mother in time, because one of her daughters was named as one of the most important people of the 20th century. That was named by Time magazine. Now, Sophia was born in London, as I say, but shortly afterwards they moved to North Quay. Her parents had bought a guest house, and it was at this guest house that she met her husband-to-be, Robert Goulden. Now, at the tender age of 18, that's more or less what you look now with 3 children, but still,
I love you.
At 18, she married the guest that she'd met, Robert, who was actually a man on the make. He started as an errand boy and ended as a very successful businessman and a politician. But they obviously had something in common, because he was very politically active. Even at that time, he was a Liberal. And so they married and moved to Manchester, where he started this calico printing firm. And he was elected to Salford Council. But Sophia started attending political meetings. And of course, in those days, and bearing in mind by this time she had 11 children. 11. Well, no, 10 living children, which wasn't unusual actually in those days. That was not unusual, and so she didn't have any babysitters. So she took her daughters with her to the political meetings, which were really about rights for women, and also they were campaigning to end slavery. Her husband was a big campaigner to end slavery, so her daughters grew up in a household where politics and discussions of the day were obviously being talked about all the time. And one of the things that they felt, which was, I think Sophia must have been very cross about, was I felt certain she would have wanted her daughter to be further educated, to go to college, university or whatever, but Robert the father insisted that no, girls had to be prepared for marriage, to be a wife and a mother. And so she was sent off to Paris to a finishing school. Now, I'm not quite sure what she learnt at this finishing school, but she obviously came back very much the sophisticated lady. Gone were the days of the rough and tumble teenager running round the glens of the Isle of Man, because of course they still kept a home here. They had a home in Strathallan Terrace that was their holiday home. They came back a bit like every year, back to the Isle of Man. But this young lady arrived back from Paris at 18, and even her sister commented about how different she was as a woman. And then at 20, she announced to her father that she wanted to marry a gentleman who was actually 24 years her senior. And so I'm not quite sure whether the father then actually thought he had done quite such a good job, But however, to carry on, Sophia and her husband retired back to the Isle of Man, where she continued to support the work for women's rights, and of course was very proud of this daughter that she had. And through their endeavours, of course, as we know now, the Isle of Man was the first place in the world to have votes for women. And in fact, what was interesting today, I was trying to check if they actually used their votes. And in the first vote after the legislation had been passed, the first 2 people to vote were women, which I thought was absolutely brilliant. At any rate, sadly, Sophia passed away, as I say, before she saw her daughter named by Time magazine as one of the 100 most important people of the 20th century. And the citation says, "She shaped an idea of women of our time. She shook society into a new pattern from which there could never be any going back." Now, I think you've all guessed who that daughter was. Of course, Sophia's daughter was Emmeline, who married Richard Pankhurst in 1879. And with his help, he was a great help in this, she fought for the right for women to have the vote, and they won.
Incredible.
That is so inspiring. Love that.
Sophia's grave, I understand, is at Braddon Cemetery. Or
Yes,
Braddon,
yes.
Is it Old Braddon Church?
Yes, it is. Yes.
Because Kate, Kate Holland, who was a former presenter on Women Today, did an amazing programme looking at women in politics. And she went to the grave, and it was an incredibly emotional thing to listen to because, obviously without Sophia...
Exactly, and it wasn't just Emmeline, her one daughter. Her other daughter, Mary, was totally active as well. And there was a real division in the family because Mary continued in, I think, a more militant way than Emmeline. And Emmeline did a lot of good works. She was a great campaigner against venereal disease. She went and lectured in the United States. I mean, so she wasn't just politically focused. I think she was more community focused as well. So a woman to admire. And as like mother, like daughter. Now, my daughter will be horrified if she's listening to this programme. Horrified.
I think she'll be
But her
inspired.
husband would agree.
Just makes you proud to be Manx, doesn't it?
It really does. But again, as we said last time when we were talking about Joanna Cruikshank, who I know didn't hail originally from the Isle of Man but played such a pivotal role over here, why don't we know about her? Why didn't we know this already?
Well, I do think it's a shame, and I really do think that the schools should make some time for Manx history. I mean, it saddened us the last time we put the internment exhibition on. Not one single school came to see that exhibition. Many of the people that came to see the exhibition in Port Erin, 20, 30-year-olds who'd lived there all their lives, had no idea that it had been such an important place. 4,000 German women and children in our tiny village. I mean, it just is amazing. And the same with Sophia. I mean, she should be remembered. Someone should go and put on election day. Someone should go and put a wreath on her grave,
There is a move, I understand, for a statue.
There is, yeah.
Yes, but I hope it is something perhaps in the way of suffragette jewellery, that they wore jewellery that denoted in purple and green and white, so it could be diamonds, emeralds and aquamarines if you were rich, but very much more simple stones if you weren't. And maybe just keep the colours alive. But yes, I think we should definitely honour our Manx heroines.
Thank you so much for downloading the Women Today podcast. As ever, if there's a guest you'd like to hear on the show or something you think we should be talking about, then we'd love to hear from you. You can contact us via email. It's womentoday@manxradio.com, or you can go to the Women Today Facebook page, like and follow the page while you're there, or we're also on Twitter. It's @MRWomenToday. Until next time. Goodbye.
Don't sit in the slow lane. Join the fast lane right now with Shaw's all-new Superfast Plus broadband. Enjoy more bandwidth, amazing speeds and the best value on the island from just £23.95 per month. So don't be left behind. Get a piece of the high-speed action with Superfast Plus broadband from Shaw. For details, visit our stores in Douglas, Ramsey and Port Erin or click shaw.com. Love being Shaw. Terms and conditions apply.